Just hit myself in the face. Hey y'all, my name is Nat. I hope you're having a terrific day today, and for this video we are going to be doing a recent reads. Before we get into anything bookish, make sure to hit like and subscribe down below, as well as tell me in the comments what was the best book you've read between December and January. Alright, so yes, we are doing another round of recent reads because majority of the books I have read lately have been for videos, and honestly, majority of this video is actually going to be talking about books I reread from December and January anyway. As you can tell right out of the gate, I hated rereading. I hated it so much. That's why they're annotated to crap. So this is going to be covering the books I have read in December and January that weren't for different videos or vlogs. Let's just hop right in. I'm going to go chronologically because that's easiest for me. Starting out for my reread month, I reread The Bone Houses by Emily Lloyd Jones, and I actually reread this to annotate it for a friend. It was a very interesting annotation process because I would be annotating her copy with just comments, and then I would be annotating my copy with a better tabbing system and having more cohesive and better colored tabs. Very fun going back and forth between my copy and her copy. I believe I originally read this for my Raid My Shelves in like October of 2021. I think I gave it 4.5 stars, but upon rereading this, I loved it even more. I just went ahead and bumped that baby up to a 5 stars. I think the first time around, I did enjoy the familial relationships that were being brought up in this. When I went in, I thought that my 2 tab colors I was going to be doing would be specifically for beautiful quotes and for the adorable romance that develops, but I eventually ended up having to add an additional tab purely for Ren's relationship with her father. I've only just realized I didn't give a synopsis. So this is a YA fantasy based on Welsh mythology in which we are following our main character of Ren, who is the gravedigger in this small town, and she handles the bone houses. Bone houses are essentially zombies or bodies that were never laid to rest properly. While the bone houses have been starting to creep closer and closer to town, the rest of the village has started to lose their belief in the bone houses. So, unfortunately for Ren, that makes her job a lot harder. Then enter 𝗖cie, who is a map maker that hires Ren to take him through this bone house ridden forest so that he can map it, and hopefully the both of them can get rich off of it. As I was saying, one of the tabs I did was for the beautiful quotes, and I knew I was going to do that because this has such wonderfully, whimsically creepy writing. I love the way that this manages to feel like a fairy tale, but is so much more unsettling than that. Slow fantasies are definitely my thing, especially if you give me a very immersive atmosphere, which Lloyd Jones definitely does in this. Every time I picked this book up, I was just transported to the world. I also absolutely adore the grumpy sunshine relationship between Ren and 𝗖cie. They work so well as foils to one another in terms of their characters, and the romance that blooms between them is incredibly sweet and wholesome. Throughout their journey in this book, they just become so protective of one another. Most of the time, Ren is the one doing the protecting of 𝗖cie, which is great. Same as my first read through, I really enjoy the way the author represents 𝗖cie's chronic pain. He's had it for so long that it's just become a part of his life. It is a burden to him, but it's not something that is going to overtake his entire existence. And then on the opposite side with Ren, as I mentioned in the beginning, I just adore the relationship we get to see with her father. Even though we don't really see her father as a character, he disappeared prior to the events of this book while traveling through the forest. Ren goes through this grieving process with him. It's so beautifully written. The way it is handled just tugs at your heartstrings. It did better upon reread. I love this book. I definitely think it needs more attention, and I can't believe I still haven't picked up Emily Lloyd Jones's next book, The Drowned Woods. Also Welsh mythology, probably gonna have that same gorgeous writing, but for some reason I haven't done that. So here's hoping I will pick that up soon. Continuing with rereads, I also reread You Deserve Each Other by Sarah Hogle. I think the first time I read this was for like a try a chapter challenge, and then I just got really sucked in. I actually had a library copy that time, so I finally bought my own copy and was able to go through and annotate it. Weird thing with this one, I had a very odd collection of other tabs that didn't fit my usual annotating system with romance books. So this is like the only romance book where the annotation system doesn't match all of the others, and it's weird. So this is a second chance romance, enemies to lovers, between two fiancés. Naomi and Nicholas have been together for about 2 years now, and unfortunately Naomi has fallen out of love with Nicholas, but his mother is a complete control freak and has basically planned this super elaborate wedding, which a lot of stuff has already been paid for. Naomi is fearful that if she breaks off the engagement, she is going to have to pay back all of those deposits. So she comes up with this brilliant idea to make Nicholas break up with her. Thus ensues a prank war between the two of them, Naomi trying to force the two of them apart while Nicholas is desperately trying to bring them back together, and it is so freaking cute. I did not plan to stay up until 4 a.m., but I did, laughing out loud. I'll admit, watching the prank wars and the bickering between these two is very immature, but it's so giggle-inducing. It's completely ridiculous and out there, and I definitely understand, like, not everybody would enjoy this, but my petty ass loves it. This book takes miscommunication as far as possible. It's so outlandish that you just can't help but laugh. I mean, could a lot of issues in this book have been resolved with a simple sit-down conversation? Yes, but then it wouldn't have been nearly as entertaining. Upon reread, I actually think I fell for Nicholas a lot faster than I did the first time because I knew he still had feelings for Naomi, so I could really see all of the things he was doing, that he was trying to be kind and sweet towards Naomi, and she just read into them as him trying to trick her or play a prank on her, and it makes everything that much more hilarious, but also just makes you shake your head at her the entire time. He definitely still messes up, but he's not ready to give up on the relationship yet, and so many of the little gestures he makes are just incredibly awe-worthy. Once Naomi becomes aware of this as well, her return gestures are just as cute. I also definitely think this book highlights the importance of knowing your partner's love language, even though that's not like specifically stated. Once Naomi comes to realize how Nicholas shows his appreciation for her, she is so much kinder. It really helps their relationship. With this starting as enemies to lovers, it's all the more fantastic that they sort of end as partners in crime. I just adore the two of them together. The parallels between Nicholas asking Naomi out on their first date and then Nicholas asking her to marry him for a second time is just so stinking adorable. Upon reread, also held up. I think I also gave 4.5 stars in my first read, but bumped it up to 5 stars here again because I just had a fantastic time on my second go around. My next reread was one I had been looking forward to for months, and yet it took me way too long to pick this book up, but We Hunt the Flame by Hafsah Faizal. If you have spent any time on my channel, you know I adore this duology. I love it so much. I have hyped it up constantly. I've recommended it to so many people and come to realize that apparently this book is perfect for me, but not for everybody else. So this is a YA fantasy story in which we are following two perspectives. First is 𝗖cie, better known as the Hunter. She is the only person in her country who can traverse this magical forest that encircles the entire land. On the opposite side, we have 𝗖cie, who is actually the prince of the ruling sultan and known as the Prince of Death because of his work as an assassin. The two of them are separately sent on a mission to track down this magical object, which will both bring magic back to their world and also remove the magical growing forest that is starting to take over the entire land. Upon rereading this and looking at my old review, my feelings are exactly the same. The writing is so good. It's so beautiful, absolutely gorgeous, completely atmospheric, really envelops you into the story. The plot is definitely slow moving. It really takes its time in establishing the history, establishing the different characters, as well as the beginning relationships, which lends into the wonderful development that happens between all of these different characters. Both 𝗖cie and 𝗖cie are incredibly complex, well-layered characters who each go through a wonderful arc in this book, but also in the entire series. They also have the most intoxicating slow burn enemies to lovers romance that just has me in a fit every time I read it. I was also a lot more aware of different hints which are laid out to twists that take place later on in the book, which definitely makes me appreciate the storytelling all the more because Faizal really laid out this plot very well. I also adore 𝗖cie, who is forced to tag along with 𝗖cie, and neither of them are particularly happy about it, but they sort of have a enemies to best friends arc as well, and I love it. His character is also well created, but there's enough mystery around him in the first book that you can't help wanting more. He's so tantalizing. Same as before, I do wish we had more time with 𝗖cie and Benjamin, two characters that we are introduced to later on in the book. But even with that, I do love the team as a whole and the dynamic that is created with all of them. The magic system is also pretty soft and not incredibly well explained, which doesn't really bug me, but I know some other people who have complained about that. Off those qualms, I'd probably rate this 4.5 stars again, but I just have such a fantastic time reading this book that I have to give it 5 stars. Even with the length, I still manage to read it really quickly every time I pick it up. So many annotations. I actually ran out of my color for the slow burn romance. So yeah, technically a 4.5 stars, but really like my rating, 5 stars. 5 glowing stars. All right, so we're gonna have a little break from the rereading to talk about the 2 graphic novels that I read for the final book support group readathon that happened earlier in January. I'll put a link to my blog up above. I ended up officially finishing out Nomen Omen by Margot Bucci. This is a trilogy of a graphic novel series that actually ends up continuing on in a new series called Arcadia. I've since made the decision that I'm probably not going to continue just because I didn't love this series that much, and it's still ongoing, so I'm just not that concerned about keeping up. Nomen Omen starts with us following Becky. She is hanging out with some friends in New York City and is attacked in a bathroom where her heart is ripped out, but strangely she doesn't die. She then is introduced to the world of literary beings which actually exist. Many of them come from Celtic folklore, and Becky learns that she has a much more creative and colorful past than she thought. I really enjoyed the first volume and was intrigued to continue the series, so once I finally did, I went in with pretty high expectations. The art is absolutely beautiful. When we first meet Becky, she actually is not able to see colors, so very often the art is in black and white, but anything magical uses colors. While the art in the second volume is still just as gorgeous, absolutely exquisite, and the color usage was amped up a lot, I couldn't get past the fact that this got very oddly sexual in the middle, and like I still don't really understand why, apart from shock value. Magical rings, torture done while naked and in shibari, a off-page rape that really didn't need to be there. Every one of these felt really weird, unnecessary, and just completely took me out of the story, which is such a shame because I was enjoying how the story was progressing. The plot is kind of hard to follow, I'll admit. While I understand that some of the characters we're introduced to are literally embodiments from different literary pieces, I did think it was kind of weird that when there's a consistent trend of Celtic characters, you suddenly introduce one from Greek mythology. Kind of broke your own trend. I do love the fight scenes in this, and I definitely enjoyed seeing Becky learning more about her background. I'm trying not to spoil this, but the way she connects her abilities with her strengths is just very interesting. It's very clever. The art around it is really beautiful. I have such weird feelings about this series because it had such promise, and then this volume happened and I just didn't know how to feel anymore. This came out to about 3 stars on my Compile breakdown. While I did finish out the trilogy, when I went into the 3rd volume, I didn't have the highest expectations anymore. I definitely think this maintained its 3-star rating. This had evolved into such a bigger story than where we initially start, and there is a lot larger cast of characters in this 3rd volume, which obviously is going to lend into the story which is continued in Arcadia, but issue is I just don't care about all of those additional characters because I haven't spent that much time with them. A side character actually dies in this volume, and I just didn't know how to react because apart from her name, I didn't really know anything about her. The art was still jaw-droppingly gorgeous, no complaints there at all. And the world within the art has actually expanded to become a lot more whimsical, which did feel like it matched a lot better with the overall atmosphere of the story than New York in the previous 2. However, the plot definitely took a turn that I was not anticipating from the beginning of this, which I guess is a good thing, but I also just, again, don't really know if I care all that much. Right before the end, there's this random 2-year skip that I still I don't get it. Finally, I'm usually a fairly big fan when it comes to cultural references in my stories. However, when the whole story is really starting to lean more into the whimsical and fantastical elements, it's really strange when there's like a Wizard of Oz reference in the middle of a fight scene. It just took me out of the story completely, and by this point it felt like those cultural references were more of a hindrance than a help. In the end, I went with 3 stars, and as I said, I think I'm just not going to continue with the continuation of the series in Arcadia. My final new book to talk about is 𝗖cie by Ron Stallworth, which I read in my weekly reading vlog in January. Put a link to that in the cards. This is actually the nonfiction memoir that was the basis for the 𝗖cie movie, which unfortunately I still have not watched, but I plan to. Essentially, Ron Stallworth was a detective who did specialize in undercover operations, and when he saw an advertisement for the KKK in his small Colorado town, he decided to actually write in for it. Little did he know that it would turn into a giant undercover investigation. I finally got to this, and I definitely think it was worth it, but I do really want to preface by saying this is a very, very slow read. It does not have a ton of narrative. Incredibly fact-based story. I do recommend going the audiobook route because I think having someone read this to me helped. It's really dry, and I can so see if you're reading this with your eyes just completely glazing over. Even though I did really enjoy this book on the whole, I did occasionally have to sort of make myself pay attention to it so I wouldn't be lost. Though I did actually laugh a fair amount. I don't think that's terribly surprising given the incredibly ironic setup of a black man being a card-carrying member of the KKK. Most of the time I was laughing was because Stallworth had actually interjected some piece of commentary about the events, but more often than not, it really felt like he was reading an incident report. In the end, I did enjoy this, and I'm pretty intrigued to see how Spike Lee dramatizes the story for a movie. Like I said, haven't watched it yet, but I still want to. Also, if it wasn't obvious, heads up for a large number of racial slurs utilized in this book. I mean, I wasn't terribly shocked, but like, you might not want to be listening to this audiobook on speaker out in public. In the end, I give this one 4 stars. I definitely think if you enjoy documentaries or true crime stories that you would like this, but again, audiobook is probably the way to go. And then finally, my last reread was We Free the Stars by Hafsah Faizal to finish out the Sounds of Arawiya duology. I can't really give you any summary on this one because it's going to ruin stuff that happens in the first, but once again, this gave me everything I wanted in an ending of this story. The atmosphere is so immersive, it completely jumps off the page. Between the food, the setting, the clothing, the weapons, everything reinforces this atmosphere. Even in this one, the plot is very slow. Faizal definitely takes the time to build up what's happening, create suspense and tension. But anytime you get into a fight scene, she'll remind you that she's not afraid to break your heart. The action sequences, however, are very fast-paced and definitely brutal, which I guess isn't terribly surprising when all major characters in this one have monikers like Hunter, Warrior, General, and Prince of Death. What really makes this book for me, though, is the Zumara, the family, the team that has been created. Every little moment between all of them, whether it's serious or humor-filled, I just loved them immensely. But again, let's be honest, that slow burn romance, it steals my attention quite often. With a book this big, off of the events of the first book, Faizal gives you just enough to make you thirsty for more and keep pushing through. But Nasir and Zafira come to know each other so well in this, to really understand each other more than anyone else in their lives, that it makes every moment, particularly towards the end of the book, feel like a powder keg waiting to explode. Not to mention the exquisite romantic writing around their relationship. There are so many absolutely stunning, gorgeous quotes. I really want to inscript on everything in my life. Those 2 final chapters. I look back on those so often. I think back on them so often. I have never ever seen a scene that is more intimate than like those final 2 chapters. They're so good. They're so good. Yeah, so if my reactions didn't tell it to you, this is 5 stars. big ol' 5 stars. Just hit myself in the face. All right, y'all. So that is it for today. Thank you so much for going to my channel. I really appreciate it. Make sure to hit like and subscribe down below. I have all my socials as well as a few ways you can support me linked in the description. I come out videos on Monday and Friday, but until then, I hope you continue to have a terrific day. Love you. Bye.